He is one of the greatest characters in The Lord of the Rings, beloved both in literary and cinematic form. While many immediately think of his great heroism, or his leadership, or his love for his companions, two of his most important qualities as king are often overlooked. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we do a deep dive into Aragorn's justice and mercy. In particular, we're looking at two instances where we see these defining qualities, both coming in the pages of The Return of the King. After the victory at the Pelennor Fields, where Aragorn had arrived with reinforcements from the fiefs of Gondor via the commandeered Black Ships, he would lead the Army of the West in marching upon Mordor. Though notably upon his arrival, he does not openly enter the city of Minas Tirith. To do so, after having unfurled the banner of Elendil, and with the steward Faramir laying wounded in the Houses of Healing, would have implied his taking control of the city, and he would not do so in such a manner. Again, an admirable trait from an honorable man. But our first moment for today's topic comes 6 days after leaving Minas Tirith. They have passed through Ithilien and have entered at last into the desolation that lay before the lands approaching the Black Gate. From there, the army can see the marches and the desert that stretch north and west to the Emyn Muil. Here, Tolkien says, "So desolate were those places, and so deep the horror that lay on them, that some of the host were unmanned, and they could neither walk nor ride further north." Now, a quick note on a fairly uncommon word featured here. It's said that some of the men of Gondor and Rohan were unmanned. In this instance, Tolkien is using this verb which originated around the 1600s, and it means to deprive of the attributes of a human being, or deprive of manly courage or fortitude. In short, these soldiers are so stricken by the horror of the approach to Mordor that they are quite simply incapable of going forward. Now, as the commander of this force, it would be well within Aragorn's right to attempt to force these men to continue, and perhaps even to deride them for their cowardice. Instead, we read on, Aragorn looked at them, and there was pity in his eyes rather than wrath. For these were young men from Rohan, from Westfold far away, or husbandmen from Losarnoch, and to them Mordor had been from childhood a name of evil, and yet unreal, a legend that had no part in their simple life, and now they walked like men in a hideous dream made true, and they understood not this war, nor why fate should lead them to such a pass. And here we see one of Aragorn's finest attributes, his capacity for mercy. He goes on, "Go," said Aragorn, "but keep what honor you may, and do not run. And there is a task which you may attempt, and so be not wholly shamed. Take your way southwest till you come to Caer Andros, and if that is still held by enemies, as I think, then retake it if you can, and hold it to the last in defense of Gondor and Rohan." Then some, being shamed by his mercy, overcame their fear and went on, and others took new hope, hearing of a manful deed within their measure that they could turn to, and they departed. And so, since many men had already been left at the crossroads, it was with less than 6,000 that the captains of the West came at last to challenge the Black Gate and the might of Mordor. Again, we see Aragorn is merciful toward these unmanned soldiers. And indeed, we are told this very mercy causes some to overcome their fear. He also gives these souls a chance at maintaining their honor, giving them a task to reclaim Caer Andros, an island in the middle of the great Anduin River, which had been taken by enemy forces. However, in this first example, we also see how Aragorn is also just. For he says this task is a way for them to not be wholly shamed, and they may keep what honor they may. There is no doubting that should both parties be victorious, it will be the ones who braved the gates of Mordor, who stood alongside the captains of the West, that will be most celebrated and held in high esteem. In the end, the dismissed force of roughly 1,000 soldiers would be victorious as well. And while it may have been a lesser deed, it was nevertheless one that greatly benefited Aragorn and his kingdom. Where a lesser king may have attempted forcing these soldiers on, or perhaps sent them back to Minas Tirith in disgrace, Aragorn allows them to keep some measure of honor in serving their kingdom. But as promised, there is also a second example, and naturally, the one I've saved is my favorite. In another unadapted moment, we find Aragorn having to deal with the issue of Baragond. This character, whom Pippin befriends upon coming to Minas Tirith, plays a pivotal role in the rescue of Faramir. One thing that's abundantly clear about the captain of Gondor is that he has the love and respect of his soldiers, and Baragond is no exception. So when the steward Denethor is thrust into madness and commands that he and Faramir be burned alive, Baragond is placed smack in the middle of the situation. Before searching for Gandalf, Pippin informs Baragond of Faramir's plight, encouraging him to abandon his post and save his captain. Thus, Baragond must choose between obeying the steward or saving Faramir's life. And Gandalf and Pippin would soon discover Baragond's choice. "Stay, stay!" cried Gandalf, springing forward to the stone stair before the door. "Stay this madness!" For there were servants of Denethor with swords and torches in their hands. But alone, in the porch upon the topmost step, stood Baragond, clad in the black and silver of the guard, and he held the door against them. 2 of them had already fallen to his sword, staining the hallows with their blood, and the others cursed him, calling him outlaw and traitor to his master. Even as Gandalf and Pippin ran forward, they heard from within the House of the Dead the voice of Denethor crying, "Haste, haste! Do as I have bidden! Slay me this renegade, or must I do so myself?" Thereupon the door which Baragond held shut with his left hand was wrenched open, and there behind him stood the lord of the city, tall and fell. A light like flame was in his eyes, and he held a drawn sword. Here we see Baragond forced into an impossible situation. First, he was forced to kill the porter, who would not allow him onto the silent street. Then he would kill 2 of Denethor's servants, as they were attempting to light the pyre upon which Faramir lay. And finally, when Denethor would make to stab Faramir with his knife, Baragond would leap in front of his beloved captain. Baragond would go on to stand guard over Faramir in the Houses of Healing, and then he and Pippin would serve under Prince Imrahil during the earlier mentioned battle at the Black Gate. However, upon returning to Minas Tirith and taking his place as king, Aragorn would have to decide what to do about Baragond. While no doubt Baragond's action of saving Faramir was good, in doing so he killed 3 fellow Gondorians. As Gandalf would say when he and Pippin found the dead porter, "Work of the enemy, such deeds he loves. Friend at war with friend, loyalty divided in the confusion of hearts." And it's this moral and legal predicament which Aragorn must judge in one of his first acts as King of Gondor. "Baragond, by your sword blood was spilled in the Hallows, where that is forbidden. Also you left your post without leave of lord or of captain. For these things of old, death was the penalty. Now therefore I must pronounce your doom. All penalty is remitted for your valor in battle, and still more because all that you did was for the love of the Lord Faramir. Nonetheless, you must leave the guard of the citadel, and you must go forth from the city of Minas Tirith." Then the blood left Baragond's face, and he was stricken to the heart and bowed his head. Here we find once again Aragorn's justice. Baragond disobeyed orders. He also spilled the blood of his own people, in a holy place no less. Yet, because of his bravery in battle and for saving Faramir, Baragond will not be put to death, but instead is banished from Minas Tirith. Aragorn is upholding the law, and he takes into account the circumstances and Baragond's service. Aragorn is just. However, Aragorn is also merciful. He goes on to say, "So it must be, for you are appointed to the White Company, the god of Faramir, prince of Ithilien, and you shall be its captain, and dwell in Emin Arnen, in honor and peace, and in the service of him for whom you risked all, to save him from death." And then Baragond, perceiving the mercy and justice of the king, was glad, and kneeling kissed his hand, and departed in joy and content. And Aragorn gave to Faramir Ithilien to be his princedom, and bade him dwell in the hills of Emin Arnen, within sight of the city. Baragond is still punished. To never again enter the city of Minas Tirith, the city he has called home, is certainly a cost. But Aragorn shows grace toward this incredibly dedicated soldier, allowing him to serve Faramir as the steward of Gondor becomes Prince of Ithilien. The situation involving bloodshed requires the law be upheld. The moral situation says Baragond did what he had to do to prevent a great evil. In both examples with Baragond and the unmanned soldiers, we see a man and a king able to implement both justice and mercy. And in this way, Aragorn not only shows us what a great ruler can be, but also gives us perhaps one of the most shining examples of Tolkien's own Christianity shining through his work. His own belief in God, who is both just and merciful. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. CCDC Red Team, Evil Chameleon, Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Freya Firestar, Chris and Meg Q, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Kiara Berlin, Z and N, Evely, Kia, Landry Quinn Walker, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.